Welcome in, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement. Your host, Lauren Sherman, is a certified financial planner and owner of the flat fee firm Integrity Wealth Management. He curates each episode with you in mind. Whether a work-optional lifestyle is on the horizon or you're already there, this show has something for you. With that, listen in, and I hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome back for another Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement. As always, I am your host, Lauren Sherman, and today we are going to wrap up part 2 of my conversation with Alex Murguia. Alex is a Ph.D. He's the CEO of Retirement Researcher. He's also managing director of McLean Asset Management, which is an investment advisory firm in Virginia. Alex writes about financial planning topics. He talks about them each week on his own podcast, and he frequently speaks at financial planning conferences. So in short, Alex is the guy you go to if you want to discuss all things finance related. Now, we covered a lot during the first part of our conversation, so be sure to go back and listen to that episode if you missed it. But for this one, we're going to start off by talking about whether or not Alex sees people's tolerance for market turbulence change throughout their retirement, or if their tolerance relatively stays the same. This leads right into our conversation about RISA, which stands for Retirement Income Style Awareness, and how Alex created an assessment tool that helps people uncover their personal retirement income style. Now, this is important because this gives you the ammunition to use income strategies in retirement that are aligned with your values and your personal style. You may very well still hire an advisor to implement the strategy, but what this helps you avoid is finding that advisor that just uses a cookie cutter approach where every client essentially gets the same income plan regardless of your personal style. This is something our firm's been using for the past few years, and we've linked an assessment tool in the show notes in case you'd like to take this yourself. This is no cost to you. It's just our free gift for being a loyal listener of the show. And then finally, we will wrap up our conversation discussing the importance of knowing your plan's funded ratio and why simply having what they've referred to as a probability of success, if you're familiar with that term, why the probability of success leaves something to be desired and why the funded ratio is very important to know. So I hope you enjoy this today's show. And as we'll hop in here with Alex Murguia for part 2. Let's jump into, so you work with a lot of retirees at your firm. So how do you see people's tolerance for market turbulence change as they move into retirement, if at all?
Yeah, if at all. This goes back to some of the research Wade and I did in terms of trying to determine someone's retirement style. Mm-hmm. And identifying someone's retirement style lets us understand better what strategy will be more bespoke to their temperament. And so I don't view it as people's tolerance for market turbulence will change as they move into retirement, simply because if they're a total return, then 100%, the way, the type of portfolio that they want with regards to a market volatility adjusted basis makes perfect sense. But if I know their income protection, then I'm going to try to, just avoid market turbulence to the degree possible and move it towards contractual income when it comes to, funding essential expenses. And so it really is, I want to understand them better, and then I can accommodate a strategy around that.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit more, because what you're talking about is the research and the technology you guys produce called RISA, or Retirement Income Style Awareness. So basically helping people become aware of what style of retirement income is going to most hit home with them and their personality. And you start to touch on there's kind of 4 different quadrants, right? That, and I the way I describe this with clients is not that necessarily, okay, you're this type. Sometimes that's the case if they're way up in the top right corner, for example, but often that's your predominant characteristic, and maybe we still want to build a portfolio with components of all 4 of these styles. But so you said one is the total return approach.
Yeah, and so One is that, so there's effectively there's many ways to draw, there's many ways to accomplish a successful retirement income plan. I think that was the one of the best aha moments that we had. And, right now it seems that the large part of our industry feels that taking sustainable withdrawals from a portfolio is the only way. But that's not the case. And so, yeah, to your point, Wade and I conducted research to identify different styles. And these styles not only identified how somebody wants to source retirement income, but they were very relatable to actual strategies that take place. And so within the total return from a retirement income style awareness standpoint would be somebody that wants a lot of optionality in their retirement income strategy, and they're willing to be more probability based towards it. And what that means is if you want optionality within a retirement income strategy, that means that you want to see your options every so often. The antithesis to that would be more of a commitment orientation, where you're willing to lock in on something as long as it solves a lifelong issue, right? And so
real quick before you move on, the optionality, because I think as you're describing that, everybody would be nodding their head and saying, well, of course I want optionality. The trade-off is you're taking on more uncertainty, right?
You're taking on more uncertainty.
And a wider range of potential outcomes.
Exactly. And that's why it going back to the total return. You have optionality, and there's another factor, which is probability based versus safety first. Probability based is I am fine with the probabilities that an asset base will go up in value over time, and I'm fine with taking distributions from that because of that increase in asset value. The well will always quote unquote be full. Contractual based, which is safety first, is I understand the whole markets over the long term go up, but I don't want to be tethered to that for my retirement income, and I'd rather push that liability from my balance sheet to somebody else's through contractual income. So you have probability, safety first, optionality, commitment oriented. Now, if you are optionality and probability based, then if you're really thinking about what that is that you're somebody that is fine looking year to year to see how you're going to fund your retirement income plan, and you're confident that the markets will go up over the long term, so you're okay with making that strategy work for you.
And specifically for income purposes too, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily like, hey, we're 40 years old, we got 20 years to retirement, we're comfortable with the market. This is specifically talking about income needs.
Exactly. This is how you're going to draw your retirement income, because from there you're going to take a sustainable withdrawal rate from the portfolio. Right. And so that's total return. The opposite of that is income protection, where you're comfortable being safety first, like you'd rather draw income from contractual income sources, and you're commitment oriented. I'm willing to commit to that right now if it's going to solve this lifelong problem. And so that would be
maybe kind of like the people that yearn for the days of a pension, where the company took care of it.
People that yearn for the days of the pension. So you have those at at its polar opposites, but you'll find that about 33% of the population is total return. The other 33 is income protection, which is interesting, right? And then you have two more strategies, and they take up the remaining 15% each, roughly, which is time segmentation, which is more of a bucketing approach, where I want the safety of contractual income, but I want to be able to review that with more frequency, like every 3 years, every 5 years, every 7 years. And that's more like a bond laddering strategy, or doing something with MIGAs or something like that, sort of that laddering component. The flip side to that is risk wrap, which is I want to lean probability based because I get it. I need to have some exposure to the market, but I want guardrails around it that will cap my upside and my downside, so I can at least give myself an out if need be. And those are more structured products that you see, called risk wrap.
So at the end of the day, it's really just about helping your client find their best strategy versus trying to fit them in the box of whatever you believe as an advisor, and taking a more holistic approach at it. Is that a fair kind of
100%? Yeah, I fully agree, Lauren.
And then obviously the follow-up question is, which one is best, Alex?
I don't know. It depends. I myself was income protection, and Wade was risk wrap.
Okay.
and he's a colleague who we created this together. So it just depends. They're all equally valid. I really feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can put a link in the notes if people want to take their own RISA assessment as well. I think the standard test, it doesn't, or exam, test and exam don't sound good. Questionnaire maybe
Yeah,
sound a little bit better.
profile or whatever.
This isn't a classroom,
No,
so
no.
maybe like what, 10 or 15 minutes, or is that even
Yeah,
shorter
no.
than
If
that?
it just depends on the type of person you are, how long you like to take to answer something. But it's about
Yeah.
12 questions, and sometimes people like to think through it a lot, and so it's one of those that you can ruminate on it. But I would kind of go with your gut when you do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And this is one where maybe like someone's actual risk tolerance, if you were having someone do a risk tolerance questionnaire, the risk tolerance might change over time. But from what I understand, their RISA like strategy is more kind of who they are, then that probably won't really change over time. Is
Yeah,
that fair?
we've seen the research leads us to think that what we're measuring is more trait-like than state-like. And
Okay.
state-like would be something like I am happy, I'm nervous. Those are things that, come and go just depending on your current situation. Trait-like would be I'm an introvert, I'm an
Mm.
extrovert, where there are more personality traits, if you will, as
So
opposed
this
to
is more
a quick
trait
emotional state.
like.
Larissa
Yeah.
is more trait-like.
Gotcha. Okay. So it wouldn't necessarily be something you need to take every year. Once you take
No,
it, if you put some thought into it, you probably have your answer.
exactly.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes a lot of sense. And I know we've had a ton of positive feedback at my firm
It's
with
great.
people taking that, just because when you can talk about the product strategy solutions within that quadrant that hits home most with that person, you you'll hear people say, it feels like you're talking just to me. Like it feels like you're speaking my language.
I think you're right. We've had the same experience. It just I think to me good science is, from what I've seen, is something that's able to take what was understood and kind of like write it out. It just surfaces something that was apparent, but you didn't really take time to
Hmm.
see, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think the RISA does that in terms of the things folks are feeling when they're discussing retirement income.
And just how different we all are as individuals, because I've had the same comment come from different people of why would, as I describe each strategy or each style, someone would say, why in the world would anybody want to do that with their retirement? And then
Exactly.
flip side, they'll say, why would anybody want to do that? Is, the exact opposite of what the other person just said.
Yeah, and
So,
that goes back to even one of the initial thoughts we had is there's no one right way. There just
right.
isn't. There are many credible ways that you can go about building your retirement income strategy in the same way that there's no one right way to make a living. All you're doing there is
Sure.
sourcing your human capital. You can be
Sure.
an advisor, you can be a teacher, you can be an engineer, you can be a doctor. One is not necessarily better than the other. It's what that person wanted to do for a living.
Yeah, that's a
To
really good way to put it.
to a certain extent, retirement income, you're just sourcing investable income, not human capital. And similarly, there's not one right way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not necessarily like a solvable equation. And even if one is quote unquote more efficient for who? When you say more efficient, you're maybe talking about the masses. And even if a strategy works 55% of the time, you don't want to be in that 45% potentially. And maybe you're not comfortable with that. So you need a different strategy. Yeah, that's getting a little bit more into it. But we've had some of those conversations too to help describe those different quadrants. So as we kind of wrap things up here, let's see. In addition to having the right income strategy for retirement, what are some other actions that you would say are worthwhile that we can all work on? Maybe, I guess, in comparison, non-productive actions. We've sometimes talked about those of trying to time the market,
Sure.
making all sorts of trades in your account, trying to see different trends of which way the market's going. So, flip side of that, what is a good use of our time if we're a retiree?
I think honestly enjoy retirement. It would be the best use of your time. Just that that kind of angle. But the reality is, if you're gonna focus on the economic aspects of it, really is always be grounded in why you're investing. Keeping yourself contextualized why you're investing will go a long way. You're investing to achieve something in retirement, and if you're always grounded in that, it'll help you make sense of why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
There's that piece. There's that. That's more existential. From the financial planning, it becomes down to focus on what you can control. Right? We can't control the market outcomes. We can't control what's going to happen tomorrow. But you can control, planning decision making that will lead to quote unquote alpha generation. By that I mean like value add. You can control when you claim Social Security. Making the wrong decisions can be quite expensive. You can control Medicare decisions. You can control tax efficiency, such as where you're withdrawing assets from, how you're reinvesting certain things, how you're bridging to Social Security. So there's things that you can control that will lead to quote unquote extra money in your account. That's what I would focus on.
Yeah. And if you're working with a fiduciary advisor that you trust, and you can, maybe not fully delegate all of those decisions, but have a partner in those decisions, I think your first answer was probably right on the money of figuring out how intentionally you worked your whole life for this big pile of money. Now, what do I want to do to enjoy this? Enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Exactly.
Yeah. I have one bonus question if I can throw it in.
Sure, throw it out there.
So I was just watching a video on this, kind of, I don't want to say bashing probability of success, but talking about, hey, a lot of advisors, to take a step back, a lot of advisors talk to clients about saying, hey, your plan has a 90% probability of success. And as a client, you might hear that and say, that's pretty darn good. Or I might say, does that mean it's going to fail 10% of the time? And the way this was framing it was, if you're trying to get to that 100% probability of success, that just means that you're going to have a 100% chance that you're going to underspend in retirement, or maybe framed another way, under enjoy your retirement, because by definition, having 100% probability of success is that's like if your goal was to pass along as much assets as you possibly could. And I've heard you talk in the past about maybe a better way to measure that instead of using probability. I don't know how deep you want to get into that, or just kind of high level that for us.
Sure. There's a couple things here. I do agree with your point. Yeah. So just to give everyone a sense of it, probability of success is a sort of a Monte Carlo term in our vernacular that is how many times was there a successful Monte Carlo simulation. And so we spoke earlier about volatility. And so if the market's average 10% a year and the volatility is 10, just to make the math easy, then 67% of the time you can expect the market to return between 20% and 0%. And that range is what's known as one standard deviation, and so forth. And so what Monte Carlo will do is you enter a portfolio expected return and standard deviation, and that's how your assets are going to increase or decrease each year. And so let's say you put your financial plan, which is your needs, what are you going to spend your money on? And you do 1,000 simulations where it's running that kind of volatility. Out of those 1,000 simulations, 900 of them succeeded. That means they achieved your financial plan. They could have succeeded by $1. They could have succeeded by $1 million, but it says it succeeded. And so you have a 90% probability of success. 900 divided by 1,000. That's what probability of success means. My issue with that is that you don't know the magnitude of failure. To your point, Lauren, you wanted to get to 100% probability. But would you care if you got to 90% probability and then the 10% that failed, you only failed by $5?
Right.
Right? It doesn't matter, right? As much. You're like, oh, that's kind of a wash at that point. And so magnitude of failure is an interesting addition to that, which is giving you a sense of, by how much were the failures, to what extent. And so that you have to see that within the Monte Carlo scope. But even then, I'm not that sanguine about Monte Carlo when it comes to starting a retirement income plan, simply because you don't know the degree of the successes either. You don't know the degree of the whatever. So the 90% is just giving me a sense of 90% of my plans passed, 10% failed. I don't know by how much or anything. What we like is a concept known as the funded ratio, which is just your assets divided by your liabilities. The present value of all your assets divided by the present value of all your liabilities. And that tells you, really, it gives you a percent of how you're doing. So a funded ratio of 90 is really telling you that you're not quite there yet. It really is, you're 90% there. You still got to work on that 10% in a major way to be able to accomplish all your financial goals. I like that number a lot better, especially as you're starting a financial plan.
I think often when we talk with clients about a 90% probability of success, they're almost framing it in the way you just described the funding ratio.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
So,
yeah,
I
agree.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of it, as advisors, we're sometimes, by default, if we're probability of success heavy, we're kind of planning for clients to leave the largest estate they possibly can, and if that's their goal, that's okay. But maybe we got to be more intentional about it and not shoot for those high probability of successes on every occasion. I think that's all I got for you. Anything else on your end that we didn't cover that you'd like to dive into?
I appreciate the time, Lauren.
I know it's been a little while since I've seen you, so I was looking forward to this, and always great conversation with you. And a lot of times it goes all sorts of different directions. I kept this one a little bit more on the track because I printed off and had some questions written down for you. So we didn't get too off the beaten path here. So to get in touch with Alex or access some of their free resources, you can go to retirementresearcher.com. We will link that in the show notes, of course. And then I mentioned earlier that Alex has a co-host podcast with Wade Pfau called Retire with Style. Other than that, check out past episodes of this show by visiting our website, integrityguidance.com, and click on the podcast tab. Other than that, thanks again, Alex, for joining us today. And then for our audience, come back in 2 weeks and we'll have another show for you. So God bless.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, Alex.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening in and supporting this show. And if you have a moment, we'd love a 5-star review to help this podcast reach even more listeners. Also, this show thrives on feedback from its audience. So if you have any topics you'd like to hear covered or have anyone specific you'd like to see join the show, please email your recommendations to our address, hello@integrityguidance.com. That's hello@integrityguidance.com. We review every email that comes in, and we will do our best to include any recommendations you have for us. Thanks again, and be sure to follow our show so you don't miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as specific tax, legal, or investment advice. Lauren Sherman is a certified financial planner and owner of Integrity Wealth Management, a flat-fee firm which serves pre-retirees and retirees in search of their own work optional lifestyle.